What defines love? It's a question echoed in countless songs and pondered by philosophers through the ages. My own understanding was once obscured by the challenges I faced growing up in a single-parent household, where adversity was more familiar than affection. I'm Gareth, a father, a husband, and a professional wrestler, still learning, still growing, every day. My journey has been profoundly transformed by encountering the love of Jesus, a love that has the power to redefine destinies and mend the deepest of scars. It's this exploration of love that draws me to a poignant story, one that not only showcases the depth of divine affection, but also its enduring impact across time. In this series, we explore the transformative power of Jesus, a figure whose resurrection marks a cornerstone of faith and the promise of new life. Mary Magdalene, a close follower, experienced firsthand the profound impact of Jesus' presence, witnessing his triumph over death. Her journey from despair to discovery at the empty tomb underscores the core messages of this series. Jesus is alive. His presence enables us to truly live now and assures us of a future that lasts beyond this life. I want to learn more about the experience of Mary Magdalene. Her encounter at the tomb propels me into the heart of this exploration. This pivotal moment where grief meets the miraculous guides my inquiry into the essence of the resurrection and its profound implications on love and loss. As I delve into this passage, I ponder the profound question: what does it mean for Jesus to be alive? The narrative continues in the following verses. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you will put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. The story of Jesus' body disappearing and then him being seen alive really resonates with me. It's incredible to witness the healing power of Jesus' love as I reflect on the resurrection. To help me unpack the meaning of this passage, I'm going to have a chat with Amy, an author, speaker, theologian. We'll explore Mary Magdalene's story, the way she recognises Jesus, and what the empty tomb and Jesus being alive really means. So Amy, what strikes you about the first account that we have of the resurrection encounters in the Bible?
Well, the first resurrection account in John's Gospel really strikes me because you have this woman called Mary Magdalene who gets up really early in the morning, and on that third day after Jesus has been crucified, he's been buried in this tomb, and she goes to the tomb and she's expecting to kind of tend to the body, and she finds the tomb empty. Now that's hugely significant because it's one of the most important facts about the resurrection that scholars who aren't necessarily Christians, everyone agrees Jesus' tomb was found empty. And the primary witness to that, the first witness to that, is a woman. Now, it's really important because in the Greco-Roman world, but also in Jewish culture at the time, a woman's testimony wasn't seen as having any validity in a court of law. So if you were going to make up a story, you would never position a woman as the primary witness to that story.
Right.
But the fact that you have a woman saying it first actually lends massive credibility to the gospel accounts historically, and it's seen as really strong evidence that the resurrection happened.
So let's talk about Mary and who she was and why her relationship with Jesus is just so important.
Yeah. So Mary's called Mary Magdalene, and that Magdalene isn't the surname. It refers to the place that she's from, and that's a small little place in Galilee. So she's a real historical person who lived in a real place. This is a person who had, lived with enormous distress. This is a person who almost certainly had suffered horrifically in this life. Yeah. And through meeting and encountering Jesus, she's transformed then into a woman who accompanies Jesus and is seen as a disciple. And then she is named as one of the witnesses to the crucifixion. So the male disciples desert Jesus. Yeah. And it's the women who stay through the whole crucifixion. After that, you can just imagine how overwhelmed with sorrow and sadness and disappointment and probably confusion she might have been. And that would be her state of mind, turning up at the empty tomb, expecting to look after his body and then finding him alive.
What I find really interesting is Mary Magdalene would have known who Jesus was. They've been together, they've seen each other. And yet we still have this moment where she doesn't recognise him.
Yeah.
Until he speaks her name.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Mary Magdalene is, in the Gospels, is a woman who was profoundly healed by Jesus. Amongst other women, she's walked with Jesus as one of the female disciples. She knows him really well. And so in this resurrection account where she mistakes him for the gardener, and she pours out her heart to him in disappointment. She's saying, someone's taken the Lord away. I don't know where they've put the body. Her mind doesn't initially go to, it must be a resurrection. She thinks, something's happened. I'm really distressed. And it's only when Jesus says her name, Mary, that she recognises him. Now, she's not expecting to meet Jesus walking and talking in a body because she knows he's dead and she's found the tomb empty. And so it's when she hears the voice that she recognises, oh, Lord, it's you. And I just think that speaks really profoundly to what the resurrection means, not just for Mary, but for us, that Jesus is actually raised from the dead in a body. It's really, really him. And it's recognisably him to the one of the people who loved him the most. And then I think for us, it speaks really profoundly to us that God doesn't just love us in general, he loves us in particular. He doesn't just love us as a blob called human beings. He loves us by name. And so, Jesus naming Mary in that way is so profound.
So we don't have Jesus in the room with us right now, face to face, across the garden, and we maybe want to have that encounter with Jesus. How do we do that today?
The resurrection of Jesus means that Jesus is alive. He's been crucified, but he's conquered death. And the resurrection of Jesus for us means he brings us alive in his love, and we can hear his voice. We can hear him call our name, and we can really genuinely come alive because of the resurrection. And that's what the Christian life is. Believing the resurrection happened is the beginning of experiencing the power of the resurrection in our own lives today.
It's become clear to me the significant role Mary Magdalene plays in the resurrection story, emphasising her encounter with the empty tomb and her journey from sorrow to steadfast faith. Drawing parallels to my own journey through a turbulent childhood, I look forward to my upcoming discussion with Galia. She too has seen God's love transform her life in times of adversity.
Growing up, early life, family was just very broken. My dad was abusive towards my mum, and then he left when I was 4 years old. Mum worked really hard to make sure that me and my younger brother had a good life, but ultimately there was that pain kind of always in the backdrop of our family, and I had no real centre of meaning for my life, and that also impacted like how I understood myself. And so I always felt like I'm just always going to be searching for part of who I am or what I'm really here on the earth for. My mum became a Christian when I was 13 years old, and because of my relationship with her being quite strained at the time, that made me even more anti-Christian.
So something must have shifted, because, we wouldn't be having this conversation now otherwise.
I was away on a youth camp that my mum and a friend had lovingly clubbed together to encourage me on with no other option, so I had to be there. And actually had this inexplicable encounter with Jesus.
Okay.
I began to realise everything about my worldview that I'd held up until that point actually didn't hold the weight that I needed it to base my entire life on it, and began a real journey through reading the Bible, talking with Christians, people who were so kind and so patient and so willing to just take me as I was and take my questions, because I really did think I was so right.
Yeah, you talked about there being an experience that shifted it.
So we were on this youth camp, and they were basically focusing on learning how to hear God for other people, and was like, oh, perfect, now I get to conduct a science experiment.
Right, yeah.
And approach this well, if I ask God to speak, and he doesn't, which he won't, because there's no such thing as God, as I believed at the time, then I can go back home and I can tell my mum, God never showed up for me and he didn't talk. Literally, that was how I approached it. And so paired up with someone I didn't know, and the girl in the seminar said, just ask God to tell you something about that person's childhood. And I can only describe it when you watch a film and then you're remembering back the scenes of the film, as you close your eyes and you're in bed at night. It was like that kind of showreel in my mind's eye, but it was this guy and a scene from his childhood. And so I suddenly opened my eyes and was like, oh, that was really weird.
Yeah.
And he was like, what happened? And I explained it to him in detail as I'd seen it, and his whole face drained of colour, and he was like, that exactly happened. You have no idea how significant a moment that was for me in my childhood. And literally in that instant, I have no idea what was going on around us, because I was like, how can this be real?
Yeah.
And so a few months after that moment of encounter and experience, I invited Jesus into my life. But really the turning point and the thing that I'd never been able to get around with it was, if God knew about that guy's childhood, then that must mean God knows about my childhood. And that was the thing for me that was completely life-changing. I've seen God come through in so many different ways in my life, like you would expect a good dad to do for their kid. It's always been about God showing up as a dad in my life faithfully, consistently, and abundantly. I've never lacked anything since knowing him as my father, and that's a very different story to my story before I knew God as my father.
So for me as a kid, my dad left when I was 6. So when people talked about God as father, I had no frame of reference. I had no idea of what that looked like, what that meant, how am I supposed to respond to that? Yeah. And actually, as time went on, I then became a dad myself. And what I thought I knew of God's love, then I was like, hang on a minute, I love these 2 beautiful, precious little girls so much more than that. And God loves me even more than that.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It was a complete perspective shift. Galia's story deeply resonates with me, highlighting the life-changing impact of meeting the risen Jesus. Her experience brings me back to Mary's story, which also speaks to me of hope and redemption in the face of challenges. While Mary had the privilege of hearing Jesus' voice and experiencing his love on a personal level, what does it mean for me to undergo transformation through love today? I'm meeting with Aaron, a student mission developer, to delve into this question.
So for someone like me, I find it hard to figure out what love is.
Yeah.
So what would you say love is?
It's a question that loads of people are asking.
Yeah.
And I guess my answer to that would be, love is what I see God to be.
Okay.
The way God loves us is unconditional. And what that means is simply this: he has no expectation, and he gives himself so that we would have relationship with him for the rest of our lives. My story is, I moved to the UK when I was 11 years old. So I'm in this new country, figuring out what life is. And when I was studying in my final year of university, kind of similar to the setting we're in, I had a moment where I felt God's love for me and everything changed. And it's interesting, right? Like, because I grew up in a Christian home, I knew all these stories. But until that moment, it was my parents' version of God's love for me. It was a secondhand story. But I remember that year, it was mine. God just didn't love everyone. He does, but he also loves me.
Okay.
And everything changed for me at that point.
So for me, my journey was different. I didn't come to university. I didn't get any GCSEs or qualifications. At 15, I was homeless. I ended up living in a skip for 8 weeks and then found myself in a hostel. And in that environment, there was a lot of people trying to find out who they are. There were addictions. There were self-harming. There was a lot of brokenness. And all of them were trying to figure out who they are.
So that's why when we talk about God's love, it restores us and makes us whole again. So when we're broken and when we're struggling with mental health or heartbroken because of our relationship, God's love meets us in that most intimate place and doesn't just leave us there. It heals and restores us.
And that is love, isn't it?
That
it's
is.
coming to God in our most broken as we are. But that then begs the question, well, what's the opposite of that?
You and me are created and wired to be loved. There is like an innate sense in us that wants to be deeply known and deeply loved. So what happens is this, you and me are wired to seek that. We search it everywhere. And we end up finding that in validation of people, in what the world offers. And often, sometimes, we get addicted to things, whether it be alcohol or drugs or whatever. We look to fill this void within us with anything that gives us that dopamine hit, that good feeling. But the reality of this is we actually end up being further and lonelier and more isolated.
So how do we, in your mind, kind of access that love? How do we engage with Jesus on that level?
He's inviting us to walk with him, to talk with him. And I think that's where prayer is key. I think we get to see and experience God's love in prayer. And we see God in creation. We get to hear God because of his Holy Spirit. Jesus isn't here. His physical body isn't with us. We don't get to see him, touch him. But his spirit is all around us. And he loves us personally, by name. Like he will say, Gareth, I love you. Aaron, I love you. And that we get to experience today. It's available for us. And I think that invitation is open.
Reflecting on life's journey, my mind returns to that profound encounter in the garden near the empty tomb. Mary Magdalene's realization, from thinking Jesus was a gardener to understanding who he truly was, shows how love can heal and bring clarity. As life throws its punches, I find resilience in this story of the resurrection. It transcends a mere historical event. It serves as a vibrant lesson in love's transformative capacity, infusing vitality into our darkest moments. And in the arena of life's struggles, amidst its fiercest battles, the resurrection stands as a beacon. Love remains undefeated. Acquainted with the desolation of lovelessness, I now embrace the boundless love that Jesus showers upon me. It's steadfast, enduring, yet brimming with newness every day. His love draws each of us into communion with the resurrected Jesus, granting us fullness of life.